Have you ever just stopped and asked yourself, when we say something is good or bad, what do we actually mean? I mean, really mean. It's a question that seems so simple, but it's the bedrock of all of ethics. Where do our values even come from?
You know, the entire centuries-long debate really boils down to this one single question. Is morality something that's just out there in the universe, waiting for us to find it, like a new planet? Or is it something we create, something we invent to suit our tastes and needs, like all the flavors of ice cream? This is the core conflict we're going to tear apart today.
So, let's put some official names to these ideas. The camp that says values are discovered, that's called moral realism. They think we desire things because they are already good. It's like we're perceiving a real quality in the world. The other camp, the one that says values are invented, that's moral anti-realism. For them, it's the exact opposite. Things only become good because we happen to desire them. It's a matter of taste, not perception.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to really dig into the case for values being invented. Then, we'll flip the script and look at the case for them being discovered. After that, we'll explore two really cool theories that try to split the difference. And finally, we're going to see why this whole abstract debate actually matters a whole lot in our everyday lives.
Okay, let's dive right in. We'll start with the anti-realist side of things. If morality is something we humans just made up, what does that actually look like? Well, philosophers have a few different theories on how that might work.
The first stop on this tour is probably the most straightforward idea: simple subjectivism. It says that when you state a moral belief, you're not actually talking about the world at all. You're just talking about your own feelings. So if you say charity is good, all you're really saying is, I approve of charity. That's it. Morality is just personal opinion.
But this is where things get, well, a little weird. Let's say Priya says charity is good, and Ben says it's neutral. According to this theory, they aren't actually disagreeing. Priya is just stating a fact about her feelings, and Ben is stating a fact about his. And since they both know their own feelings, they're both telling the truth.
And that just doesn't sit right, does it? When we argue about right and wrong, it feels like we're arguing about something real, not just comparing notes on our feelings. And what's more, if saying X is good just means I like X, then you can never be wrong about a moral claim. It would mean we're all morally perfect, which, let's be honest, is a pretty tough pill to swallow.
So, to try and fix that, some thinkers came up with cultural relativism. The idea here is to zoom out. Morality isn't based on what I think, it's based on what my society thinks. Good just means approved by my culture. This seems to make sense of why different societies around the world have such wildly different moral codes.
But yeah, this one hits some major roadblocks too. For one, think about moral reformers. People like Martin Luther King Jr., who stood up against their society's norms. This theory says they were by definition wrong. Second, which group do you follow? We're all part of a nation, a family, a friend group. What happens when their values clash? And finally, it often confuses what people do with what they value. Two cultures might do very different things, but for the exact same underlying reason.
Now, after hitting these walls, the philosopher A.J. Ayer came along and decided to just flip the whole board over. His idea was called emotivism, and it's radical. He said moral statements aren't facts at all, not about the world, not even about our own feelings. They're just bursts of emotion. So saying charity is good is basically like shouting, "Hooray for charity!" And saying murder is wrong is just like shouting, "Boo, murder!"
It's a clever way out for sure, but look at what it costs us. It completely removes reason from the picture. If all we're doing is shouting hooray and boo at each other, then we're not really having a debate, are we? We're just in a shouting match. It just doesn't explain why we spend so much time trying to give reasons for our moral beliefs.
So, if the invented camp seems to be full of these tricky problems, maybe we were too quick to dismiss the other side. Let's flip back and seriously consider the case for moral realism, the idea that values are actually out there to be discovered.
And this is where realism really shines. It just clicks with our experience. It explains how we can be genuinely wrong about morality. It explains why our arguments feel like they're about something real. And most importantly, it explains how we can make actual moral progress. How a society can go from thinking slavery is okay to knowing it's a profound evil.
Okay, but here comes the giant flashing but. In fact, there are two of them. First up is what we can call the knowing problem. If moral facts are real, objective things, what are they? You can't see justice under a microscope or weigh kindness on a scale. So how in the world do we even know they're there? Well, one of the most famous answers comes from a philosopher named G.E. Moore, and it's called intuitionism. He said good is like the color yellow. Think about it. Try to define yellow for someone who's never seen it. You can't. You can't break it down into simpler parts. You just have to point at something and say, that's yellow. Moore argued good is the same. We can't define it, but we have this kind of rational intuition, a mental faculty that just lets us see it.
But even if we solve that, there's a second, even weirder problem, the motivation problem. See, regular facts don't make you do anything. Knowing the sky is blue doesn't compel you to act. But moral beliefs are different, aren't they? Believing that helping that injured person is the right thing to do comes with a built-in push to actually do it. So if moral truths are just cold, hard facts, why do they have this magical power to motivate us?
So it feels like we're caught between a rock and a hard place. Neither side seems to have a perfect answer. And this is where modern philosophy gets really, really interesting. Let's check out two theories that try to find a way out of this simple invented versus discovered trap.
First, let's look at a pretty bold and kind of bleak idea called error theory. The philosopher J.L. Mackie looked at both sides and basically said, you're both kind of right. He agreed that our moral language acts like it's stating objective facts, but he also agreed that those objective facts simply don't exist. So what's the conclusion? Well, if we're all constantly talking about things that aren't real, then all of our moral statements are false, every single one. We're all participating in a widespread and maybe useful error.
Okay, so if error theory is a bit of a downer, here is a more hopeful path: rational constructivism. This idea says, what if values aren't discovered or invented? What if they're constructed? The idea is that moral truths are the principles that any perfectly rational, perfectly informed, and completely impartial person would agree to live by. So they aren't just floating out there in the cosmos, but they also aren't just based on our whims. They're built from the very structure of reason itself.
Okay, wow. We have been deep in the philosophical weeds, right? Subjectivism, realism, error theory. It is totally fair to step back and ask, why on earth should any of this matter to me? Why does this debate matter in the real world?
Well, this table pretty much sums up the whole headache. Look at this. Realism, the discovered view, is great at explaining moral truth, the feeling that we can be right or wrong, but it's terrible at explaining why we should care. Then you have anti-realism, the invented view. It's perfect at explaining motivation. Of course we're motivated by our own feelings, but it completely fails to explain moral truth. It's like each side is holding one piece of a two-piece puzzle.
And that's why this matters. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a fun thought experiment. Your answer to this fundamental question, whether values are found or forged, shapes literally everything. It changes how you argue, how you vote, how you raise your kids, and how you think about justice. It is the absolute foundation of your entire moral worldview.
So we'll leave you with this to chew on. If you were forced to pick a side today, which would it be? Are you a value discoverer exploring a moral landscape that already exists? Or are you a value inventor helping to construct that landscape for all of us? And what does your choice mean for how we ought to build a world together?